there is big news in Canada. Canada has always had a pretty robust, like, anti-communist Ukrainian community. We've talked about it before. There's literally like monuments dedicated to like actual Nazis and shit, or actual Nazi collaborators, or people who were directly a part of like Nazi brigades. And now it's coming to a more prominent position where people are more aware of it. We're going to talk about that as well. Obviously today, there's so much to cover. Jesus Christ. Saying that someone fought Russia during World War II means that they were siding with the Nazis. It's such a weird thing to say. This doesn't mean that you have to love Stalin or anything. You don't have to hug and kiss Stalin or even be a communist, really. Let's talk about Canada. Oh, Canada. Canada watchers already know that there's like a big Ukrainian diaspora in Canada that has been like very openly celebrating, you know, Bandera, Nazis, Nazi collaborators and whatnot. There's like a lot of people that live in Canada, or historically speaking, like they're very, very openly anti-communist and have been able to kind of get away with being anti-communist as like Ukrainians and have people not really question like, wait a minute, like you're Ukrainian, but you're anti-communist, you're anti-USSR. That's fine. Okay. But like from what time period exactly? Like, what do you mean you're, you know, anti-USSR Ukrainians? What does that mean? Now, does this mean that there are plenty of anti-USSR people in Ukraine right now? Of course. But if you, I don't know, immigrated into Ukraine in and around like 1948 and onward, right? And you are openly anti-USSR and you just kind of kept that energy, like it gets a little weird. What do you mean you fought in World War II? Oh, did I say immigrated into Ukraine? I meant immigrated into Canada. What's going on there? Like, what's happening? Well, you know, what's happening is something that we've talked about a lot, and people actually do get very mad whenever I cover this. But like, I've talked about the national interests or the nation-building interests of Ukrainians being unfortunately tied to some less than savory individuals historically. You know, individuals that participated, facilitated in the pogroms, and also sided with the Nazis while doing so because they thought maybe, you know, the Red Army, USSR, maybe we'll be able to carve out our own nation state outside of the USSR, outside of, outside of that. And of course, a part of that was also taking Jewish Ukrainians and throwing them in camps and killing them. Same with Polish individuals as well. So there is that history, you know. There are plenty of countries in that region that have similar complicated histories, of course. And of course, our boy in Canada, this man, Yaroslav Hunka, got a standing ovation in Congress, in the Canadian Congress the other day. And everyone was like, wait a minute, what's going on? So let's take a look at what happened.
The federal liberals under attack from opposition parties and Jewish groups after a Ukrainian veteran who served in a Nazi military unit in...
So first of all, they didn't present it as such. They did not say, yeah, Parliament, whatever, not Congress. Who cares? Shut up. Nobody cares about your fake country, okay? Go celebrate more. Go celebrate more Nazis. In America, we don't do that. Just kidding. We, of course, do that in America, too. But this is such a funny thing to happen in Canada because they're like they love the aesthetics of liberalism so much that even their conservatives love the aesthetics of liberalism. There is a lot of things that I want to mention here with this man. When this news story first came out, they presented it as a patriotic Ukrainian who fought against Russia in World War II. That is how they covered it. I just want you to understand something. This is a much more important part of the story, in my opinion, than like the actual story now. Once everybody realized like that means he was a Nazi, they covered it. They said he served in the Ukrainian army against the Russians during World War II. That is, of course, a very interesting way to frame someone. Hopefully, I guess with the secondary assumption that you know that other people are not going to question it and they're going to think like, oh no, USSR is bad, Russia is bad, obviously, right? Yeah, except regardless of what your position is on Stalin or communism in general or Marxism, Lenin, any of that shit, there's one thing that the Western world is united on, even the fucking Germans, as a matter of fact, and that is that Nazis were bad. If you were fighting against the Nazis, you were good in that particular moment. And the USSR happened to be very good at killing Nazis, and specifically Ukrainians that were also a part of the army of the USSR were very good at killing Nazis and also died a lot. Like a lot of people in Ukraine died as a consequence of, fighting against the Nazis. Now, of course, on the other side, there were Ukrainians who did not want to fight alongside the USSR against the Nazis and thought maybe we could use this as an opportunity to carve out our own nation state of Ukraine that is totally removed of the USSR and communist scourge. They were anti-communists, and they, of course, worked with the Nazis. This is significantly more important than just the Azov Battalion. For those of you who think like, oh, Azov Battalion still is in operation, that is not all that significant. The Azov Battalion is unimportant in the grand scheme of things when I'm talking about like the development of a nationalist movement in Ukraine and its historical formation. That part is significantly more important than just like simply Azov Battalion or a marginal percentage of like open out and about Nazis that fight alongside the Ukrainian forces. This is more so a more holistic issue. So anyway, here is the news story. Originally, they said that, 7 million Ukrainians served in the Red Army, and Ukrainians made up many leadership positions in the Red Army. Of course, do you think it could be miscommunication, or is homie an actual Nazi vet? Oh, no. He is not just any kind of Nazi vet. He is a part of the SS. This is the type of dude that you, like, execute still. You know what I mean? No, he's like super duper Nazi. He is the guy. Like, he is literally the type of guy that normally he would have been like tried and executed, or like years later he dies and then like people celebrate his death. You know what I mean? Like it happened like a couple months back. There was like some fucking 98-year-old dipshit Nazi who like passed away and everyone was celebrating it, right? Like it's that type of dude. It's interesting to think about that, because specifically, this is not about like being pro-USSR or being pro-communism, being pro-Marxism, being pro-socialism at all. This is more so like being anti-Nazi. And for a very long time, at least like some of the older Ukrainian diaspora in Canada has kind of really pushed this narrative of like, we were trying to just build a nation state and it's totally valid. And they've gotten a lot of clout. So let's watch what happened here.
Wasn't just invited to hear Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky speak in Parliament on Friday, but received a standing ovation from all sides of the House of Commons.
So what's really funny about this, by the way, is that like now, of course, the conservatives are fucking attacking Justin Trudeau and being like, typical Justin Trudeau, who did blackface, by the way. Remember when he did blackface? And it's like, bitch, you were there. Every single one of the conservatives in the Canadian Parliament were giving this Nazi a standing ovation. I'm sorry. You can't fucking sit there and be like, oh, I can't believe that this is classic Justin Trudeau mishap. It's like, bro, we saw you on camera. Yeah, I mean, there's an entire Wikipedia segment dedicated to memorials in Canada, to Nazi and Nazi collaborators. A lot of these come from the Ukrainian diaspora. That's what I was talking about. Yeah. On a less talked about thing that happens as well, because there is not a lot of interest in the Western world, like this is a constant. The anti-communist sentiment is so powerful that you can really get away with like being pro-Nazi for a very long time, as long as you just say, no, I'm not a Nazi. I'm just like anti-communist. I'm just anti-communist. Even though the time when you were anti-communist was the time when you were pro-Nazi. Japan has a lot of problematic pro-imperial Japan museums too. Yes, but have you noticed that they're very cool? Because like the Imperial Japan, albeit brutal, and did a fuck ton of war crimes that surprisingly never get covered. Very odd, for the record. Like very interesting that the anti-Chinese, like Manchurian genocidal aspects of like Japanese colonialism in World War II, leading up to the World War II and during World War II, is just like totally a secondary note that nobody ever talks about really. The Ukrainian volunteers on the Waffen SS were those, it's the Galician one, which is a volunteer unit. They're not even like conscripted or anything. They volunteered to sign up after the invasion of the Nazis and knowingly signed up to massacre Jews, communists, and undesirable Slavic groups. They weren't ideologically different or nationalist Ukrainians. They were dedicated fascists who killed women and children. This dude in particular described his experience with the Waffen SS as the happiest time of my life. It was the Nazi Foreign Brigade, It was the SS unit for foreigners. And, it's good to know. It's good to learn about history. It's good to learn about history because I think, maybe everyone in the Canadian Parliament should learn about history, I think. I know it's not Trudeau's fault, but no, it is Trudeau's fault. It is, I'm sorry to say this, but this is absolutely 100%, 1,000,000% the entire Canadian government's fault for just being so horny to be anti-communist that you end up propping up Nazis, which is not a shocker if you are even a little intelligent about American history or global history in general, World War II history in general. If you're like even a little bit aware of what the fuck was going on during that time period, then you personally understand, like, wait a minute, this guy was fucking anti-Russian during World War II? Whose side was he on then? It's not that complicated. There's no way this was an accident either. No, it's not. I think that the only accident was, I guess they thought that, like, everyone is so horny against, like, Russia and the USSR and anti-communist that, like, no one will really think twice about what the fuck is going on here. But yeah, these are the photos of the SS Galicia Division veteran who was given a standing ovation by the Canadian Parliament, Prime Minister of Canada, and President of Ukraine. He published these photos himself in this division during training in Germany. He is standing in the middle of the first photo, second to the left photo without a helmet near a machine gun in the third photo. He wrote he volunteered to join the SS Galicia Division in 1943 in Ternopil region in western Ukraine. My peer-reviewed journal article concerning involvement in SS Galicia Division members in mass murder of Poles, Jews, Ukrainians in Ukraine and Poland, including mass executions about 100 Jews, Poles, and Ukrainians in my high school in Pitatsky near Lutsk. And according to the CBC, a top commander of the Nazi SS-led unit accused of burning villages filled with women and children lied to the American immigration officials to get into the United States and has been living in Minnesota since shortly after Second World War. According to the evidence uncovered by the Associated Press, officer and founding member of the SS-led Ukrainian Self-Defense Legion and later as an officer in the SS Galician Division. According to records obtained by the AP through a FOIA request, the Galician Division and the Ukrainian Nationalist Organization he served were both a secret American government blacklist of organizations whose members were forbidden from entering the United States at the time. Here's how they presented him. Oh, yeah, the deputy prime minister's, has Nazi grandparents, by the way. Yes, we've talked about this before as well. Anytime I talk about it, though, everybody yells at me and says, Hasan, what's your suggestion? Like, don't support Ukraine? It's like, no, that's not what I'm saying at all. But, like, don't support Nazis is, I think, a pretty basic fucking concept across the board. So just a reminder for everybody, yes, Chrystia Freeland, the deputy prime minister, has literal fucking Nazi collaborationist grandparents who she also has defended time and time again. I've talked about it time and time again. It basically doesn't even fucking matter. No one gives a shit because you can just kind of like deafen the conversation. Notice how the conversation on the Nazi shit doesn't necessarily revolve around like every single person in Ukrainian parliament not really having any kind of issue with this and having like an open affinity in certain instances towards like anti-USSR Nazi collaborators and direct Nazis, and instead like, oh, what a mishap by Justin Trudeau. Because the only time people even fucking talk about this issue is when they're talking about this issue from the perspective of like back and forth, silly ass political conversations. They're like, oh, this looks bad for Justin Trudeau. It's not just that it looks bad for Justin Trudeau. It is a more spiritual problem in the West and how horny they are against socialism, communism, whatever demonstration of that like they literally openly will defend Nazis and prop up Nazis. Here's how this guy, who was very Googleable at the time, here's how he was presented in Parliament.
We have here in the chamber today Ukrainian Canadian world veteran from the Second World War who fought the Ukrainian independence against the Russians.
Like, I'm not a particularly smart person. I'm a very simple guy. I'm a very simple guy with a very simple brain, okay? I know that at the top of the hour, there's a 3-minute ad break. There's a couple things I know. One of those things I know is if you are a veteran during World War II and you fought against Russia, well, then there's not that many sides involved in that situation. The Russians were allies of ours during World War II. I feel like we have gotten so brain broken in the West, and it's that famous French study I show you guys all the time where like in the immediate aftermath of World War II, when French people were asked, like, who shouldered the greatest burden during World War II, 75% of Frenchmen said the USSR did, the Russians did. And then, like, now when you go back and look at it, like, half of a century later, and it's entirely, everyone says America. That was deliberate propaganda. Russia switched side. It's not that simple. Brother, that is such a dumb fucking take. You read one Wikipedia article about Molotov-Ribbentrop or whatever the fuck the other dude's name is, and you literally ran with that, not thinking about any other thing. Like, the most formative parts of World War II are not leading up to World War II. It's how World War II happened and who won, okay, and who lost. It's ridiculous. Like, this is no different than you know the energy of this? The energy of this is the fucking Republicans being like, I don't know if you know this, but Abraham Lincoln, he was a Republican. Like, that's the same shit you're doing when you do this. Oh, really? That's so crazy. I can't believe there was a non-aggression pact that was put forward. I wonder what happened after. Probably nothing, right? Oh, that's right. World War II happened. So that was kind of more important, I think, than the non-aggression pact originally. It's like looking at like pre-Churchill England and being like, well, they were doing appeasement, so they were pro-Hitler. It's hard to think of them as allies since they went to my country after the war and didn't leave for 40 fucking years. I mean, this is like the other major reason, but you're not Canadian. You know what I mean? Like, a lot of people in Eastern Europe also have deep anti-communist sentiment, anti-USSR sentiment, and that's one thing, right? But, like, if you're in fucking Canada, it's the same energy as, like, a dude in Ohio rocking the Confederate flag. At that point, you have no historical reference point. You got no skin in the game. You have no historical reference point. You're just riding for it for the fuck of it. That's what I'm saying. Like, you have no direct involvement. You just literally are just saying, nah, man, you don't understand. Them Nazis, those were our boys, brother. It's just so stupid. Oh, it's so funny to be like, yeah, you know, I love their heritage, not hate, brother. It's heritage, not hate, but their heritage is what I love. It's like, well, except Ohio was like one of the most notable Underground Railroad states. No, that's exactly the reason why I used Ohio as an example. When you see Confederate flags in Ohio, it's like, what are you doing? Like, you were on the other side of this. You were the most anti-Confederate. Why the fuck are you culturally appropriating racism like that, you fucking idiot? That's the reason why I used Ohio as an example. Or, I mean, sure, fuck it. Let's use Canada as an example. Like, you have no dog in the fight on either direction, and you still have a Confederate flag. Like, what's happening there? Like, how delusional do you get? It's awesome. They might not be racist. You're stereotyping. Wait, what? Are you in here literally defending riding the fucking Confederate flag? Like, no, it means you're racist, like 100%. The only reason why people don't make that distinction, that there would be no distinction for the swastika, the only reason for the Confederacy to not have that distinction is because they got fucking owned even harder than the Nazis. That's number one. And number two, literally, as soon as it was over, they packed it up and were like, we are going to do a full-scale propaganda misinformation war. The Daughters of the Confederacy, instead of fucking churning butter at home like the good girls they were supposed to be, instead fucking, rolled their sleeves up and went in to fucking propagandize the Southern position and were able to actively undermine historic, like the actual history and rewrite it in a way to make it seem like the South was actually trying to preserve their heritage and not necessarily defend their material interests in the form of slavery. Okay? So yes, any symbolism that points to that in the United States of America is a symbol that is allowed to exist beyond just like straight up, I'm probably more core dem than you. What? I don't give a shit what you think you are, weirdo. What the fuck? He's like, listen, brother, I'm a real Democrat. You're not. And what are you, a real Democrat from the fucking, are you a Dixiecrat? Is this like 1984 and you're a Dixiecrat? What's happening here? My man said, I'm a core Democrat. He's the one Japanese guy in the island that's like, no, I don't give a fuck that World War II ended. You know what I mean? I'm still holding this territory. I'm holding it down, brother. It's real for me. And he's the one Dixiecrat in 2023. He's like, no, you don't get it, brother. Henry Cuellar, he's my one guy that I like, even though he's Mexican. It's just me and Henry, man. We're just holding it down, baby. The only reason why I would be a little bit more understanding of the differences between a swastika and the Confederate flag is exclusively because, like, there was no de-Stalinization or denazification in the South, unfortunately. If anything, they, like, completely blew up the fucking Reconstruction Project and reinforced that exact same racial hierarchy, and it was a major issue. That is the reason why we still have these racial wounds in this country that we haven't been able to address. The North did not go hard enough. 100%. Never forget that. Let's continue.
And continues to support the troops today, even at his age of 98.
I can't. I gotta run it back. It's just funny because, like, we shit on, like, kick streamers or whatever for, like, doing Nazi celebrations and whatnot. Meanwhile, you got, like, lib-ass Canadians in fucking Parliament that woke up that morning and put on their frock and their high collar, signifying status, and this, like, stupid-ass fucking bow tie or whatever. It kind of goes hard, I'm not gonna lie, actually. And dressed up to be like, all right, today we are going to do Nazi apologia, don't you know? Yeah, that's right. I love this guy. He fought against the Russians in World War II. Don't think about it any further than that.
Here in the chamber today, Ukrainian Canadian world veteran from the Second World War who fought the Ukrainian independence against the Russians. And
like, after that pause, you should have just, like, stopped and reconsidered what you just read. Like, what? Wait a minute. What? Fought against the Russians during World War II? We were fighting against someone else during World War. We were allied during World War II with the USSR, I think.
Continues to support the troops today, even at his age of 98.
We can give the benefit of the doubt to Trudeau since he doesn't have to know Ukraine's history, but what about Zelensky himself? How come he applauded him too? He's the president and he must have known and reacted immediately. Zelensky knowingly saluted a Nazi? Bro, I don't think Zelensky gives a fuck about anything. He just wants the money and the weapons. He will salute and celebrate whoever the fuck they trot up. At this point, especially post-invasion, there's no, it's out of control. It's not going to happen. No one knew about the guy being there. That's really interesting that you just said that. So notice how in Parliament, the speaker just announced him as, like, we just watched it. This is the reason why I wanted to fucking show you something, okay? I wanted to show you something to see, like, if people could exercise critical thinking in that moment. Here's what I don't fucking understand. How are you still defending this? He literally says he fought against Russia in World War II. I know this is his own district, right? Like, the veteran lives in his, the fucking Nazi lives in his district and he, like, doesn't give a shit. And he loves it, whatever. That part, like, I understand him bringing the fucking Nazi. I'm trying to explain to you why Canadians don't give a fuck about that kind of thing anyway. It's an ongoing issue. Make no mistake, this also ties directly into, like, the Black Book and the anti-communist, like, victims of communism memorials. Half of the fucking time, it's not an accident that, like, the victims of communism memorials also have literal Nazis and their names on those memorials. I wonder why. Like, it's not. It's directly antagonistic. Communism and Nazism fought. Communist forces, the USSR, they fought against Nazis. They did that. That's just history. Anyway, so my point is this. This guy doesn't have a district. He isn't elected. You said it's in his writing or whatever the fuck. Like, listen. There are major Ukrainian diasporas in Canada that live all over Canada that are they're a constituency. And in a lot of those places, they have these monuments that I'm talking about. It's not something that is new or unique. It's not new. It's not unique. This is, Dan Beckner has talked a lot about this. Shouts out to Dan. Shouts out to the Chapo boys. But it's something that has been ongoing for a very long time. And the only reason why people don't really think about it is because they are anti-communist. They're like portrayed as anti-communists. They kind of hide under the banner of anti-communism, anti-socialism, and also, anti-USSR. So that's precisely the reason why they've been able to like kind of get away with it, because people just don't give a shit. They're like, that's my enemy. The enemy of my enemy is my friend, except he was my enemy as well. I don't know why people don't understand what I am mentioning here is like ridiculous. I don't know. I guess you're like deliberately obtuse or something if you're trying to defend this, because as soon as he introduces this person as a veteran from World War II that fought against Russia, everyone should go, what the fuck? When I first heard about it, I went, what the fuck? And this is very scary. This is how you get to this shit. Like, this kind of attitude is not designed in a vacuum. No, the communists were worse, and that's a hard contest to win. Like, the idea that, like, communism is worse than Nazis should be considered like the most insane thing to say. People should be ashamed to have this kind of take. At that point, you are not a centrist. You're just a Nazi. At a certain point, is it not Holocaust revisionism? It doesn't matter. It's the same energy as like being deeply anti-Semitic but pro-Israel. They will let you get away with it a little bit in mainstream media. You know what I mean? Ben Shapiro will defend you if you are a rigid anti-Semite and say anti-Semitic things. As long as you're pro-Israel, Ben Shapiro will defend you. He has done so in the past. He did it for Ann Coulter. And it's the same thing. You can do a little bit of Holocaust revisionism or Holocaust denial as long as you're so expressly anti-communist that is the major point of contention there. Everyone hyper-focuses on the anti-communism aspect and forgets that, like, the people that were anti-fucking communists in many instances, perhaps nearly in all of the instances throughout history, have been like very reactionary and fascist people. It's hilarious considering that, like, this is the one thing that even liberals understand. Do you get what I'm saying? Like, this is the one thing that liberals understand. And it's like, oh shit, we just applauded a fucking Nazi is not going to look good. Like, the broader majority, the normies who are not as like tuned into what's going on in Ukrainian politics or whatever, even they will look to this and go, oh my God, they brought a fucking literal Nazi veteran to parliament and gave him a standing ovation. There's no salvaging that at that point.
The Ukrainian independence against the Russians, and continues to support the troops today, even at his age of 98.
Yeah, look at that. Every single member of parliament, dude, every single one got up and celebrated a fucking literal Nazi. That's awesome. At that moment, at the brittle age of 98, I suspect that he thought, you know what? We might have lost the battle, but I think we might be winning the war. One of those moments where you're like, I thought we had lost the battle and the war, but it turns out maybe we are winning the war. He's 98. He ain't going to do shit now. Lol, Canada is so dumb. I mean, it doesn't matter. It's the fucking aesthetic. It's the principle behind it, too.
His name is Yaroslav Hunka.
Do you not make a distinction between those fighting for Ukrainian liberation from the USSR and those Ukrainians who were actual Nazis? Wait, what? Bro, there is no fucking way to defend this. I hope you're not trying to, right? I mean, the man that they're talking about is quite literally a volunteer Nazi. That's the lib take on Twitter. There's no, like, Wehrmacht defense here. Like, there's no Nazi adjacency, especially for him. Yeah, this is the fun, especially when you consider that significantly more Ukrainians fought for the Soviet Union against the Nazis. Like, so many of them fucking died. This dude was literally in the foreigner brigade of the SS, and you're like, well, It seems like this guy whose unit was accused of war crimes, understandably, who killed like Ukrainian Jews and many Polish people and shit. Like, maybe he just wanted independence. That's sick, man. Insane take defending this. He was literally fighting against his own country. How can he be patriotic? I would like to point out, however, that being a Ukrainian member of the SS was not the same thing as being a German member of the SS. Germans put the people of Eastern Europe into often impossible situations. Collaboration could be a survival strategy. It's important. Oh, dude, cut a liberal and a fascist bleeds has never been a more prescient fucking take. Oh, it's so good. The hilarious part about this is that these are like the very same types of people, like the very same types of people who are like, oh, did you go on the Joe Rogan Experience? That must mean you're a fascist. Or the very same type of people who will turn around and be like, wow, defending China much? You would be defending the Nazis. And it's like, man, that is such a wild fucking take from you, considering that like half the time these people just want to fucking defend certain ideas rather than really examine the historical context. You know what I mean? This person went and examined the historical context and said, nah, fuck it. Now, listen, here's why this is an insane take. Saying that being a Ukrainian member of the SS is not the same thing as being a German member of the SS. German put people of Eastern Europe into often impossible situations. Hello? There were so many fucking Ukrainians that were fighting against the Nazis. Like, this guy made the deliberate choice to remember this. Nonetheless, it is a disservice to Ukrainians to honor Ukrainian veterans of the SS, not at least because the vast majority of Ukrainians were victims of the Second World War and many died fighting Nazi Germany and the Soviet Army. Okay, well then that's fucking nuts. Like, you can't follow this up with this. Even if you're fucking, one of those guys who's like super invested in the NATO stuff, you know, this gives a major fucking propaganda talking point to Vladimir Putin that like the Russian media will just, ass fuck into oblivion. Like, I make no mistake, I have never for a single fucking moment believed that like Russians are denazifying Ukraine. If anything, they are literally Nazifying Ukraine instead of denazifying it, because people, when their fucking houses are on fire and their roads are being bombed with artillery shells, end up having very reactionary perspectives and will maybe find themselves in a much more nationalistic position, much more reactionary position. There is no denazification of Ukraine happening. The people that are supposedly denazifying Ukraine, some of those forces are also Nazis themselves. There's Nazis on fucking both sides. Wonderful stuff happening in Eastern Europe. But having said that, when you do stuff like this, you do end up allowing Vladimir Putin to cut these fucking idiotic, silly propaganda talking points. House of Commons Speaker relieved Japanese veteran who fought against China couldn't make it. Even if he had turned up, it would have been like that other guy, he explained. My aide said he wasn't even a soldier. He was a doctor for some generic unit. Unit number 713 or 731 or something. I mean, that's a joke, chat. Don't take that seriously. But it is a very funny parallel to be like, yeah, he was a doctor. Also, he was given an opportunity to, he was a doctor and also never criminally charged. So technically no wrongdoing. You know what I mean? He did everything right and they didn't indict him. The other funny part about this is that, who else is going to cut so much propaganda off this? I feel like India. That's the other part of it. Like, just last week, Canada was like, wow, it's really fucked up that you assassinated a Canadian citizen on Canadian soil, India. If I'm Indian on this day, I am fucking going nutty. I'm like, wow, talking a big fucking game, Canada. Talking a big game. Are you sheltering more people? Hey, Canada, have you thought about not sheltering people against foreign governments? I'd be using this non-fucking stop. Indians love Hitler. Doesn't matter. In this very moment, first of all, that's a ridiculous thing to say about fucking one of the most populous nations on the planet, even though there is truth to certain nationalist aspects of Indian politics. But it is still funny because, like, oh my God, dude, all the worst motherfuckers, all the biggest hogs globally, all the way from Russian pushing Z hogs to the Indian nationalist hogs are running the gamut. Follow up on the India versus Canada drama for later. The largest Indian news network, Republic TV, Indian equivalent of Newsmax, threatens to nuke Canada. What?
ये नहीं कि बीच में खत्म कर। हाँ। मिस्टर ट्रूडो तुम क्या हो?
Indian TV threatening Trudeau with a nuclear attack on Canada. These morons don't know that India's atomic energy program has started with a Canadian reactor. Guess what, dude? They got the nukes now, so suck my dick. You know what I mean? It almost feels like deliberate. You know how we've talked about before where, like, I know not every single fucking person that is in Ukraine fighting against Russia is a fucking Nazi. I know that. That's a ridiculous thing to say. But if you look at Associated Press, it's very hard to not make that assessment because it somehow always feels like they are literally deliberately taking photos of soldiers that just have like the black sun, like a black sun tattoo, always. And it's so fucked up. And this is the same energy. It's like, what did you do? There are so many Ukrainian veterans that did not fucking fight alongside the Nazis and fought against the Nazis. And you went and you propped up the one fucking veteran, dog. That's insane. It's so stupid. Like, what are you doing? Like, are you doing this deliberately? Are you just trying to be like, there's like a quote from him, I think. Did he? Oh, here. Okay, here it is. Here it is. So in 1943, Hunka volunteered to join the 14th Waffen Grenadier Division of the SS 1st Galician. During his time in SS Galician, he was photographed training in Munich and Neuhammer. In 1944, Hunka was deployed into combat against the Red Army forces on the Eastern Front of World War II. Following the conclusion of World War II in Europe, Hunka immigrated to Canada and joined the Ukrainian Canadian community. He remained active in Waffen SS veteran circles there and maintained a blog on the internet where in the early 2010s, please, drum roll, please, you have to understand something. He's not even apologetic, okay? He described the years 1941 to 1943 as the happiest years of his life. In addition, he compared veterans of SS Galician to Jews, arguing that both groups were spread in worldwide diasporas from their homeland and could only return after several years of exile. Now, you might say, Hasan, this Wikipedia page was created yesterday. What the fuck do you mean? He didn't have a Wikipedia page. It don't matter. He had a blog. What do you mean? This stuff is not hidden. Do you think this was all a big, like, secret? Like, no one was aware of it when he was a part of the Waffen SS veteran circles? Speaking to the CBS 60 Minutes program in 1997, Canadian historian Irving Abella, who is currently a professor for Canadian Jewish history at York University, bluntly summed up the political climate at the time. One way of getting into post-war Canada, he said, was by showing the SS tattoo. This proved that you were an anti-communist. It's a weird thing for people to come to terms with, people to like comprehend with today's standards, because everything you've learned in school is like, you're anti-Nazi, you're bad, Nazis are bad, right? Like you learn that, and then you don't really recognize that there was a time and place where Western forces, specifically the United States of America especially, were aligning with Nazis because the Nazis, the ones that didn't die or weren't executed in a military tribunal, weren't punished criminally, were the ones who were the most rugged anti-communists, and they were significantly more afraid of communism. The idea that you consider this to be strange, right? Like, it's understandable. If you're like, if you never thought about this sort of thing, you're like, how is this even possible? Which is why a lot of people are shocked when I tell them that once Germany was brought into NATO, the actual German Nazi generals were placed in charge of NATO. Like actual fucking Nazis, and not even the ones that were like, oh, maybe we should kill Hitler. You know what I mean? Like, not even those Nazis, like straight up the ones that were on board with Hitler were literally, instead of being executed, were fucking a part of NATO. This is 100 years of propaganda at play. That is there's a reason why you immediately have this fear. Maybe even in this community, when you hear about communism or the USSR or socialism or whatever, like you don't immediately go, wait a minute, this is just like a simple disagreement of how the economy should be organized. And instead you think, pogroms, 100 million dead, 100 guerrillion dead. Like that is all by design. That is all by design. None of these things are shocking, at least to me, especially because like I cover it all the fucking time, and it becomes hilarious when like people come in here and go, have you seen this Canadian Nazi shit? That's crazy. Canada police are investigating a vandalism of monument to Nazi troops as a hate crime. This was 3 years ago. The anti-hate network chair, I'm frankly dumbfounded, cenotaph commemorating Ukrainian SS division was graffitied. Yeah, that is a real sentence. Graffiti spray painted on a monument to Nazi soldiers in a small Canadian city is being investigated by the police as a hate crime, a move that has prompted disbelief among human rights advocates. Around 21st of June, the words Nazi War Monument were spray painted on a cenotaph commemorating soldiers on the 14th SS Division on Ontario Cemetery, the Ottawa Citizen reported. The cenotaph is located in Oakville's St. Volodymyr Ukrainian Cemetery, roughly 40 kilometers, 25 miles from Toronto. Regional police have said they were treating the graffiti as a hate-motivated incident, but declined to release the wording of the message. The 14th Division was made up of Ukrainian nationals who joined the Nazis during the Second World War. Members of the division are believed to have murdered Polish women and children, as well as Jewish people. Because of their role in the Ukrainian nationalism, however, the soldiers have been commemorated by at least 2 diaspora communities in Canada. It is against the law in Canada to make a public statement which incites hatred against any identifiable group, which, according to the police in Ottawa, it seems Nazis are an identifiable group, so I guess it's a hate crime to be anti-Nazi. They went after a journalist for calling out that it was a different statue in his coverage of the vandalism of a different Nazi statue in Edmonton. Alberta journalist charged with mischief in vandalism of controversial statue. Duncan Kinney was charged after the Ukrainian military commander statue in Edmonton was defaced in 2021. Edmonton police have charged the editor of a left-wing Alberta news outlet with a mischief after a controversial statue of a Ukrainian military commander was defaced last year. He was charged with mischief under $5,000 in retaliation to an August 2021 incident that occurred at a Ukrainian complex in the area of... This is a different one. Chat. This is a different Nazi statue. Last August, the words "actual Nazi" were written in red paint on the statue of Roman Shukoyevich. I fucked it up. I said it wrong. At the Ukrainian Youth Unity Complex. During the same week, a memorial in St. Michael's Cemetery near 138th Avenue and 82nd Street was also defaced with Nazi Monument 14th Waffen SS. Now, the problem is, it's not even defacing it. Like, the placard says the same thing in that situation that, like, the graffiti says. Like, this is an accurate label. Basically a community note, yeah, providing context. Shukovich's role in the military has fallen under increased scrutiny over his actions in leading the Ukrainian insurgent army during the Second World War and the deaths of tens of thousands of Belarusians, Jews, Poles, and Ukrainians. The Friends of the Simon Wiesenthal Center for Holocaust Studies has called the removal of the memorial, stating that they honor Nazi collaborators and war criminals because they are. Kinney is the executive director of Progress Alberta and the editor of the Progress Report. He was involved in an ongoing dispute with Edmonton police after his media accreditation was revoked. In an article about the issue, he wrote that the EPS were attempting to silence the Progress Report, which features reporting from Kinney as frequently critical of the police. Oh yeah, I mean, this is my favorite fucking dumbass video, and we'll cover it in a second. I want to point out something important here. None of this justifies Russia's actions in Ukraine. It literally does not. So do not think that I'm like even remotely fucking justifying any of that shit. But it's fucking ridiculous to defend Nazis like this. I know that a lot of people, instead of actually addressing the problem and being like, hey, maybe we should stop hyping up Ukrainian Nazi collaborators because they were anti-Russia, like so horny to be fucking anti-USSR, anti-communist, anti-socialist, that like we just end up aligning with Nazis regularly. But, you know, there are genuine negative implications to doing such a thing. And it's wild that it has gone on for as long as it has. And we have covered it many, many times over. And as a matter of fact, a lot of people fucking yell at me all the time for talking about this. A lot of these people that are hyper on the fuck Hasan train will, of course, always refuse to come to terms with this shit. What is this? Oh my God, the Nazi's granddaughter did the meme, Teresa Hunka. Good people don't spend their time harassing marginalized communities. Dedo is waiting in the reception hall for Trudeau and Zelensky. Wait, what? Yeah, she's pro LGBT and fucking you know, pro LGBT, and sometimes maybe sometimes she just loves her grandpa. She loves her grandpa. She probably doesn't know. Come on, dog. She probably doesn't know. Bro, it's not like Dedo was fucking hiding it. What are we talking about? You think, okay, let me say something. You think Dedo doesn't have fucking you know, memorabilia? I don't think he does. No, dog, he wrote a fucking blog, dude. In 2010, he was writing. He was a part of like a veterans community, the SS Ukrainian veterans community in Canada. Are you kidding me? Who set up his blog, you think? I grew up in a UA community in Canada. Grandparents don't go around saying I was with the Nazis. Okay, did they have a blog that they wrote about their memories, for the record? You know, Combatants News, the internet's version of the Quarterly of the Association of Former Soldiers of Ukrainians in America, Brotherhood of the Soldiers of the First, UNA. If you think Big Homie doesn't have his jersey hanging up in his fucking closet, I don't know what to tell you. This is the article where he says it was the best years of his life. The Polish army and the civilian population are fleeing along the road in the direction of Berezan in continuous roll, and the German planes are catching up with them from time to time. Every day we impatiently looked in the direction of the Pomorians with the hope that those mystical German knights who give such bullets to the hated cowards would appear. One day, instead of them, a column of horsemen with red stars on their caps arrived from Berezan. This was the first demonstration of Father Stalin's guardianship over us, the first echelons of enemies of the people to Siberia. More of the ones that followed. The only thing the OUN dogs and the Nazis disagreed about was Ukrainian independence. The other part about this, the hilarious part of the hilarity of this story is that, like, I don't even think Nazis were interested in giving Ukraine any kind of fucking nationalist independence anyway. So, like, they ended up doing it for the love of the game. That's the wild part about this story. They were just fucking rolling against their own fucking neighbors and against their own kin that were fighting under the banner of the USSR against Nazis for the love of the game. Against Polish people, against Jews in Ukraine. He calls Hitler the liberator. The new liberator of the Ukrainian people, Führer Hitler, reigned over the Berezansk land. Portraits of Hitler in a long overcoat and raised cowl, covering his menacing face with a small, if artificially attached, whiskers under a sharp nose, and with the inscription Hitler Liberator hung in each classes, the Führer immediately revealed his plans for Ukraine, liquidating the provisional Ukrainian government in Lviv and imprisoning Ukrainian leaders in concentration camps. A new wave of arrests followed. It was easier to confront the new enemy because A, he was easy to recognize, B, spoke a foreign language to us, and C, he did not permeate our society with sexos as the Muscovite did. By the way, you know what's really funny about this? He says liberator in air quotes, and then he still ended up fucking fighting alongside him. I just turned 16, and the next 2 years were the happiest years of my life. I had no idea that what I experienced in those 2 years would fill me with love for my native city in such a way that it would be enough for me for the rest of my life. I didn't know then that dreams about those 2 years, about the company of charming girls, about carelessly cheerful friends, about fragrant evenings in the luxurious castle parks and walks around the city would help me get through the anxious times of the following years. He's talking about World War II. That the memories of the Berezansk gymnasium in the old town hall with its professors and increasingly cheerful and noisy students will support my heart and soul in a foreign land in the coming decades. I was so happy. Oh, man. Many students of the Berezansk gymnasium died a heroic death in the ranks of the UPA in the Galichnya division. I do not want the reader to understand that my entire generation was ideologically motivated and spiritually conscious. In a bag of healthy apples, there are also rotten ones. It will depend on the relationship between those two qualities of apples in the course of a given generation. There were some bad apples in the division, you know. But ultimately, you know, a couple bad apples don't spoil the entire Nazi bunch. That's the other funny part about this is that, like, the fucking collaborators were also imprisoned by the Nazis themselves in many instances too, which is, you know, should have given you an indication. Or, I don't know, everything they said about Slavs not being white or a part of the in-group should have given you the indication that, like, maybe you shouldn't collaborate with those guys because they're not going to save you. But no, I'm telling you, they did it for the love of the game, dog. That's it. You can't be that fucking cucked. Yeah, those friends of the UPA killed 50 to 100K Polish civilians. That is the other part of this story that is, like, also insane to me, which is that, like, the current Polish perspective, obviously, due to their anti-USSR, anti-communist sentiment, is literally that, like, it's fine. You know what I mean? They're, like, aligned with some of the forces and that massacred them. You know what I mean? Historically. Not that long ago, really, when you think about it. He wondered why the Jews were running from a civilized nation like the Germans. He's a fucking pig dog. Yeah, I mean, he was a Nazi. Yeah, his best years coincided with the worst pogroms, by the way. But it was the best of times. It was the worst of times. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's both sides. Both sides need to be thought about.
And I was going to say he's in the gallery, but I think you beat me to that. But I'm very proud to say that he is from North Bay and from my riding of Nipissing-Temiskaming.
Yeah, he's from his riding, brother. North Bay, represent.
He's a Ukrainian hero, a Canadian hero, and we thank him for all his service. Thank you.
He said we thank you for your service fighting. Thank you for your service in the Nazi brigade. Zelensky joins the Canadian Parliament's ovation to a 98-year-old veteran who fought with Nazis. The man was a part of the SS Galiciana, a unit whose history has been whitewashed by veterans groups in the West. The Canadian Parliament gave a standing ovation to Friday. Dude, listen, this is the exact one-to-one comparison to the Confederacy. If you let this kind of propaganda, if you give it even a little bit of fucking life, if you give it even a little bit of existence, they will utilize every avenue they can, including the very much alive and robust anti-communist existence in places like Canada, in places like America. They will use that as an avenue. They will use that as an opportunity to thrive. Yeah, he was, the Canadian Parliament gave a standing ovation on Friday to a 98-year-old immigrant from Ukraine who fought in a Third Reich military formation accused of war crimes. Polish media outlet reported my tweets. There is complete blackout of this epic scandal in mainstream Western media, even though my research-based Twitter threads concerning the issue have already 2 million views. It's changing now. Now people are actually covering it a little bit. Here is
on our lives, on our world, will be so much greater if Putin wins this war that we will and have to stand every single day until Ukraine wins this war.
It's so funny seeing Justin Trudeau try to do take an aggressive stance. It's like, bro, shut the fuck up, bitch. Shut the fuck up. Don't try to do that. What an incredible article. Kremlin says Canadian recognition of veteran from Nazi unit is outrageous. What are we doing? Is this pro-Kremlin? What's happening? What's my takeaway here? Is my takeaway supposed to be, honestly, I guess we got to hand it to the Kremlin here? Is that what we're doing? Or is the takeaway, well, if the Kremlin said it, then it must actually be bad? Politico. Nazi-linked veteran received ovation during Zelensky's Canada visit. Readers out of context. Yaroslav Hunka was not just linked to the Nazis. He was literally part of the German Nazi military, serving as a Waffen-SS soldier. This group was declared a criminal organization by the International Military Tribunal in Nuremberg in 1946. This further proves your point about stopping this propaganda, that there's a good reason that Germany doesn't let the Nazi shit be spread around under the penalty of law. And even in Germany, you can't override through censorship. You cannot override the genuine reactionary interest that comes from the ground when the material conditions are worsening. And the perfect example of this is that the AFD is rising to prominence. Do you get it? The AFD is pro-Nazi as you can be, while simultaneously not saying that you are actually a literal Nazi, because there are rules around that sort of thing. You know, it's just, the reason why I wanted to give you this background is because, this doesn't happen overnight. This didn't sneak in. This has been a deliberate, not dissimilar to the Daughters of the Confederacy style, misinformation and whitewashing operation that's totally prescient, that took advantage of the anti-communist sentiment during the Cold War in Canada, in the immediate aftermath of World War II, that they took advantage of and were able to gain prominence, and were even able to utilize, as I showed you, the police. They, in two separate instances, one, they investigated someone defacing a Nazi memorial as a fucking hate crime, which they dropped later. And two, they literally charged a fucking progressive journalist with inciting vandalism when another one of the Nazi memorials that he wrote about was vandalized. And the vandalism wasn't even a real vandalism. It was just simply telling you that at the top of the hour, there's a 3-minute ad break. Anyway, I love when dumbass Canadian right-wingers are watching Justin Fidel squirm as he tries to justify his Canadian Parliament standing ovation in celebration of an actual Nazi is mouth-wateringly delicious. What's delicious is not being hit with the top of the hour ad break.
Saying that this happened. The speaker has acknowledged his mistake. and has apologized. But this is something that is deeply embarrassing to the Parliament of Canada and, by extension, to all Canadians.
I mean, no, it's not. If that was the case, then you would have taken down the Nazi monuments all over the place in fucking Canada, which they exist, very much so. And new ones are being built all the fucking time, too. Because if you don't fucking nip it in the bud, these guys, they're very ideologically motivated. They're very ideologically driven. They will do anything and everything they can to fucking defend Nazi principles. For non-Jewish Ukrainians, Stalin was a greater danger to their survival than Hitler. Keeping Stalin out was a matter of life and death for them. When Stalin wins, sure enough, he brutally murders Ukrainians. Stalin's crimes against humanity outnumber Hitler's. Yeah, there you go. You can say stuff like this without people going, dude, what the fuck are you saying right now? Because of Red Scare propaganda. Like, this is nothing more than Holocaust revisionism at that point. And you will get sucked into it. If you don't really think about it and you hear it from all different avenues, you will 100% agree with it. That's why, while I regularly do say that, Stalin's leadership was fraught with controversy and plenty of awful things happened, things that should not have happened. Ultimately, the one thing that Stalin was very good at was, one, robbing banks in his early age. That was very cool. Okay, victimless crime. And two, killing Nazis. Like, that's it. These guys can't even do that. They can't even fucking, they have to be like, no, Stalin is worse than Hitler. And when you do that, when you say fucking psychotic shit like that, you are doing Holocaust revisionism.
I think particularly of Jewish MPs and all members of the Jewish community across the country who are commemorating Yom Kippur today. I think it's going to be really important that all of us push back against Russian propaganda, Russian disinformation.
Bitch, why did you push into Russian propaganda then? You literally did that. The number one propaganda from Pootie Poo is like, oh, we're denazifying Ukraine. We're denazifying Ukraine. And then you went and you fucking put a Nazi in the parliament. You know what I mean? Like, what are you doing? You're the one who gave them the dub. It's just so stupid. Why do liberals not want communism? What do you mean? What? Of course liberals don't want communism. What? Liberalism revolves around the defense of private property. Communism is, in its most reductive terms, or socialism in its most reductive terms, is the evisceration of private ownership over property. Liberalism is always going to be at odds with socialism. How do we counter the fact that Hitler and Stalin had a pact agreement over Poland? This is a common thing liberals use against commies when we say cut a liberal and a fascist bleeds. Yeah, ask them what happened after. Like, that's it. At a time during appeasement, there was plenty of back and forth between Stalin and the German administration at the time. And the original intention was to literally fucking immediately ask for support over the British and the Western world, which they routinely ignored in the appeasement era. So people were fucking cutting deals left and right until it was impossible to continue cutting deals. This does not mean it's a good thing, but if you want to understand the situation, people always do the conservative chud fucking the Republican Party fought the Confederacy shit when it comes to this pact. But yeah, here we are.
And continue our steadfast and unequivocal support for Ukraine as we did last week with announcing further measures to stand with Ukraine in Russia's illegal war against it.
We already covered the liberals running defense for this or trying to be like, actually, but here is the news story around it.
To dive into this latest political fiasco, Mackenzie Ray joins us from Ottawa. Mackenzie, we appreciate this. So let's go back a moment. How did this happen and what has been the reaction so far?
Yeah, what a shocking story. The House of Commons Speaker, Anthony Rota, was the one who...
Not a shocking story. Only shocking that people are actually getting mad about it because it got to a point where it was unavoidable. Okay? That's it. What's shocking to me is that they haven't hit this, this is actually the Kremlin propaganda that's making this a bigger issue. I'm surprised that they didn't immediately run that counter because it's so objectively a fuck up by every metric.
who invited Yaroslav Hunka, who was a former Ukrainian veteran who fought in a Nazi brigade back in World War II. And Mr. Rota not only invited him, but kind of gave him some praise. Here's what he had to say in his speech in the House of Commons with Mr. Zelensky, the Prime Minister, and all the other MPs in attendance.
We have here in the chamber today Ukrainian Canadian world veteran from the Second World War who fought the Ukrainian independence against the Russians and continues to support the troops today, even at his age of 98.
Now, Mr. Rota's office says that he did not know the Nazi-linked past of Mr. Hunka when he was invited. He put out a statement saying, "No one, including my fellow parliamentarians and the Ukraine delegation, was aware of my intentions or of my remarks before I delivered them. I accept full responsibility for my actions." I asked Mr. Rota's office what accepting full responsibility means, if he's going to be resigning as Speaker. No word on that.
Again, if you were exercising a little bit of critical thinking and you weren't so fucking horny to be like anti-USSR, anti-communist, anti-fucking socialist, if you weren't that, if you didn't operate under that assumption, you would literally fucking hear the words, "fought for Ukrainian independence during World War II against Russia," and immediately go, "Oh my God, that's a Nazi." Because that's what many people did. And it's especially psychotic because, like, there are plenty of Ukrainian veterans that were not pro-Nazi or sided with the Nazis and instead sometimes died fighting against the Nazis or survived fighting against the Nazis. It's the same fucking energy as constantly putting up dudes with like swastika tattoos as like the only people defending Ukraine. Like, what the fuck? There's plenty of goddamn motherfuckers out there who don't have swastika tattoos. Just put the camera on those motherfuckers. What are you doing? Are you by design trying to make it seem like the only people defending Ukraine right now are Nazis? What the fuck's going on?
That the Prime Minister's office also said that he and his staff did not know that Mr. Hunka was going to be in attendance, nor did they know about his past associations with the Nazi Brigade back in World War II. A statement from his office saying no advance notice was provided to the Prime Minister's office nor the Ukraine delegation about the invitation or the recognition. The Speaker had his own allotment of guest seating, which were determined by the Speaker and his office alone. That is not unusual to have these. Speaker having his own gallery. I was in the gallery during the speech, and there were a number of individuals there, but obviously very embarrassing for the Speaker, the Prime Minister, and for Mr. Zelensky as well. We've heard from a number of Jewish groups, all outraged by the fact that Mr. Hunka was in the gallery and cheered by many parliamentarians. Pierre Poilievre, the Conservative leader, says that there's
I'm not gonna lie, if there wasn't this big of a hubbub over it, if there wasn't this much like chaos and commotion over it, they would have just like treated this as any other day. Why should they change course when, like, as I've shown you over and over again throughout the first fucking 2 hours of this broadcast, that like this is not anything new.
Absolutely no way that the Prime Minister did not know about this, saying that protocol officials from either Global Affairs or the Privy Council office would have known about this. Jagmeet Singh, the governing partner for the Liberals, says he'll be bringing it up with the government, and I'm sure we're going to hear a lot more reaction about this when the House of Commons starts back up today at 11 a.m.
Yeah, I would imagine. I mean, the news obviously shocking to so many people. You mentioned briefly about him, Yaroslav Hunka.
Russia's devastation and their immense sacrifices in World War II are why I, as a German, live in a free country today. That doesn't mean they're doing the right of why they do it. Yeah, no one is saying that either, by the way. I hope that everybody fucking understands that. I am not in any way saying that like what Russia is doing today is correct or good. But I am entirely confident in my statement that that I repeat regularly, that Nazis were fucking bad. Brave take, Hasan. I know. Nazis were bad, and especially during World War II, the USSR were the good guys.
Hunka, but what more do we know about him?
Yeah, he's a 98-year-old man who lives in North Bay, which is the riding that Anthony Rota, the Speaker, represents. So that in part is why he was invited to come and speak here. And he has, I think, a checkered past is certainly one way to put it. In his remarks, Mr. Rota said that he fought against the Russians. Well, he was a part of the 1st Ukrainian Division, which is also known as the 14th Division of the Waffen-SS, which was a Nazi division. And how do we know that Mr. Hunka was a part of that? Well, he's posted about it extensively on the internet. He put a number of...
This story is so funny, dude. Fuck. How do we know about it? Well, he was the one guy who's 88 years old who was writing a blog, as a matter of fact. The one guy at the age of 98 was writing a fucking blog, dude. He was 88 at the time when he was posting on a fucking blog. As every day passes, the more I can't believe the U.S. joined the Allied powers in World War II. Dude, I joke about this, but like, if things were like 3% different, that would have not happened. 3 or 4% difference, and that doesn't happen. Like, even if Pearl Harbor somehow is intercepted, that doesn't happen, and the U.S. joins the war on the German side. Okay, there's a lot of things that like worked at that time in the perfect direction for the United States to join on the side of the Allies, but we kind of take it for granted. And even then, even at that time, they were still very much like anti-communist, anti-socialist, anti-USSR. There were plenty of elements in American governance that was openly and expressly anti-Soviet, anti-USSR. So, something to consider. Any president we've ever had who wasn't FDR and we would have joined the Nazis, FDR's relationship was decent, but I don't think that's like the sole reason as to why this happened, because that's a little silly. Yes, Justin Trudeau's Deputy Prime Minister, Chrystia Freeland, who we've talked about quite extensively on this broadcast, which everyone always used to say I am a fucking Russia collaborator and a pro-Russia Vladimir Putin guy for even bringing up, has a Ukrainian Nazi collaborator grandfather, majored in Russian history. She absolutely knew she was clapping for a Nazi and did so proudly. She has waved Ukrainian insurgent army flags at Ukrainian events prior to Russia's invasion of Ukraine and has openly lied about her, or not even openly, but like openly defended her grandfather's past as well. Her grandfather was also a propagandist too, right? Like there's articles and shit.
Blog post up in 2011 discussing his involvement in it. There's a key quote I want to read for you here. In July 1941, the German army occupied Barhanzi, which is a city in Ukraine where he's from. We greeted the German soldiers with joy, he said. He also posted a number of pictures of him in 1943 when he signed up to fight alongside this 14th Waffen-SS division, including pictures of him training in Munich in 1943. So there is clearly no doubt from his own words.
Like, dude, it's the funniest thing because it's like so entirely undefensible. What do I always say, chat? Nazis fucking love ratting themselves out because they can't shut the fuck up because they're proud of it. They're fucking proud of it, dude. In order to sell the message to the masses, Nazis and neo-Nazis, they know they have to like hide their power level. But when push comes to shove, you're always going to fucking get them to betray their best PR interests and openly state their desires. At least nobody's going super far to deny that he is one. Yeah, the only thing that people are saying is like, well, he was a SS guy, but like maybe it wasn't so bad that he was one. That's the only thing I've seen thus far.
That he has associations with this Nazi division.
So, Mackenzie, as bad as this is, the timing for the Liberals obviously couldn't be worse. The party suffering in the polls, and not to mention, this is Yom Kippur, the holiest day in the Jewish.
There's nothing funnier than like Canadian hogs who literally are like trying to do book burnings and like kill trans people are being like, whoa, I can't believe Justin Trudeau collaborated with a Nazi. It's like, bro, you're a Nazi. Like, what do you mean? If anything, you should vote for Justin Trudeau then. But of course, they never examine their own fucking worldview and how much it suspiciously aligns with literally historic Nazi opinions. But, that is for a different day, I guess.
Calendar. So talk about the impact for the party, not just, as a whole, but also for Anthony Rota himself.
Yeah, I don't think there's ever a good day to have someone who fought alongside the Nazis be invited to Parliament and give a standing ovation to them. But the Liberals are already in a very tricky situation down in the polls. You mentioned Yom Kippur. This is a very important time.
When Putin was invading, part of his justification was the amount of Nazis in Ukraine. Do you think there's any truth to that? No, fuck no, dude. No, that's fucking bullshit. No, that is bullshit propaganda. That's like entirely stupid. Do not ever, for an even brief moment, believe that dumb shit.
Time for Jewish Canadians and Jews across the world. And Mr. Rota is certainly in a lot of trouble. The job of the Speaker is to maintain decorum in the House of Commons, to not bring the House into disrepute. It's fairly clear that he has done that from his actions here, even if it was not intentional. I'll be interested to see what the opposition calls today, whether or not Mr. Rota should resign. We haven't seen that so far from them, really trying to pin the blame on Justin Trudeau. That's been Pierre Poilievre's tactic. I'm also interested to see if Liberal MPs will be calling for Mr. Rota's resignation. So certainly be interesting to watch the House later today.
Actually, never mind. Vladimir Putin is actually a rugged denazifier. That's why he killed the leadership of Wagner. Think about it. Real five-head maneuver from Putin. He's like, I'm denazifying so hard, I'm denazifying my own forces.
Today. The other problem is for Mr. Zelensky in the situation that Canada, Mr. Trudeau, and Mr. Rota has put Mr. Zelensky in. We've heard falsely from the Russians from basically the beginning of the war that the goal of the war from the Russians' perspective was to denazify Ukraine. That is not a real issue. That is false. But certainly this situation...
The truth is more that Azov was taking advantage of the situation, positioning himself as a liberatory force. Yeah, if only some fucking dumbass himbo political commentator literally on the day of the fucking Russian invasion talked about how Russia's invasion is going to be incredibly damaging because reactionary fascist forces are seen as liberators, as an emancipatory force for good in times of unjustifiable irredentist action. I mean, I don't know. Surely, I did not make that assessment. I mean, after all, I'm a fucking idiot, and there's been 1,000 fucking videos on. Anytime I even fucking breathe in the direction of Ukraine, there's 1,000 videos from like horny ass warmongers talking about how I like want every Ukrainian to be assassinated or some shit, and how much I love Vladimir Putin. So
is not good. We've already seen the Russian embassy in Canada tweeting about how the fact that Mr. Zelensky gave a standing ovation to someone who fought alongside the Nazis. So a very difficult situation politically for the Liberals, but also putting Mr. Zelensky into a difficult situation as well.
Many layers of the story still to unfold.
Why does that bother you so much? I wonder why I get mad that like there are entire fucking cottage industries. There are entire cottage industries of people who are supposedly, ostensibly my ideological allies who not only deviate from my perspective, but instead of like examining what my perspective actually is, choose to cut propaganda to drive a genuine wedge in this community and try to run a smear campaign and, do it in a relatively successful way. There's a lot of that message doesn't just stay there. People just don't go, Hasan and I have a disagreement on this issue. It goes into, Hasan wants Ukrainians to be genocided at the hands of Russians because he's a Vladimir Putin puppet. And also, as a matter of fact, it's really bad. Hasan's only foreign policy opinion is that he hates America and nothing more. That, in and of itself, is a very fucking prescient take that is actually swept up a lot of like baby leftists and people who are just like on their journey to learn about this, which is why so many people always go, Hasan's bad takes on X subject. Hasan's takes on foreign policy are the worst. Hasan's foreign policy takes are just simply America bad. The reason why that message is reinforced over and over again is so that, nobody fucking listens to what I have to say about foreign policy, American foreign policy, or foreign policy in general. It's not surprising that every single one of those people also turn around and go, also tankies. Tankies are the worst thing. Tankies. But your takes are bad. Yeah, I know. Well, thank you for being here, despite thinking that my takes are bad. And maybe you will personally change your opinion on certain issues. You know what I mean?
Fold. We appreciate the update, Mackenzie. That is Mackenzie Gray joining us from our Ottawa bureau. Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
The smearing strips the nuance out of your takes and no one wants to hear you out. I know. It is very undesirable and very frustrating that I can never cut across the seemingly sea of pro-State Department propaganda being cut in independent news circles, specifically online and on YouTube. And it's unfortunate, but it is by design, and there's not much I can do about it beyond just, keeping my head down and being uncompromising in my commentary. If you want to understand the nuance behind it, I explain it all the time. It's just you're never going to hear that from the people who hate me and cover my takes on it every single time, which I'm sure there will be 1,000 different fucking articles and 1,000 different fucking YouTube videos in the aftermath of this 2-hour segment. The moment that a veteran showed up on uniform, they should have known. Out of uniform, they should have known something's up. That's actually a really good take. Yeah, why didn't he wear his uniform if he's a veteran? Veterans love wearing their uniforms. Yeah, buddy, everyone who thinks you have a dumpster foreign policy is just bad faith and has been tricked into thinking that way. I 100% don't believe that. I think that everyone who thinks I have a dumpster foreign policy, for the most part, has not been tricked into thinking that way unless you have read manufacturer consent and understand that that is something that is designed to be that way. It is not an accident that like anyone who deviates away from the State Department propaganda on America's foreign adversaries keep finding themselves going, all the former wars and all the former engagements that America was involved in were bad, but this time it's actually good. This time it's for a good reason. And then 20 years pass by and you go, actually, you know what? Never mind. All the foreign involvements that America was engaging in was actually bad. Now that 20 years has passed, we can fucking talk about it honestly and earnestly, but this time it's actually good. And you guys do that all the time. You repeat it over and over and over again. And it doesn't matter. It's not really a conversation that we're having in earnest. It's just, and it's not ever a simple disagreement. It's always, I just want bad things to happen to whatever you think you are liberating, whatever group of people you think you're liberating. It's entirely the same fucking people who are whipped up in a frenzy about WMDs and all this other shit. And if I was doing this during the invasion of Iraq, those exact same people would 1,000,000% be jumping in here to be like, why don't you want democracy to come to Iraq? Because it's the same exact principle. And what would I point to at that time? I would point to the fact that WMDs were bullshit. It was a bullshit narrative that they had made up. There was no evidence in the international community that this was a real issue. I would point to the fact that, you know, America had done this already and involved itself in Iraq affairs time and time again. Here, they did it during Afghanistan when I said Joe Brandon's pull out of Afghanistan was the right thing to do. What did they say? They said, you don't care about the women of Afghanistan. You don't care about the women of Afghanistan. You don't care about the women of Afghanistan. The only way to protect the women in Afghanistan is by nuking the green zone or whatever. It's just, you know, I'm a progressive, but I always somehow find myself on foreign policies and foreign policy and foreign affairs. I always find myself in line with the State Department suspiciously. I will never examine my worldview and whether I am motivated into thinking this way because they're tugging on my heartstrings and the things I genuinely do care about, emancipation of all peoples, you know what I mean, and defending democracy and things of that nature.